Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we are officially into Week 14 action here with the finish of Monday Night Football yesterday evening. This video is coming out Tuesday morning. We are now moving on here to what is quite possibly the final regular season contest for many of our redraft leagues out there. There's a potential you've got 2 more weeks if your fantasy season is going to be ending in Week 18, but for most of us, this is it. It's do or die, and we've got to find ourselves getting into those playoff spots. So what I've got for you all today, with most of, I would assume, your guys' trade seasons and deadlines now being passed, and after week 13, I'm expecting most of those are over with. If you still got trade advice that you're looking for from me, you can still feel free to put that down in the comment section below. But what I've got today is 5 running backs that aren't necessarily of the elite tier or of the upper echelon running back group, but 5 players who I feel could have league-winning upside and potential because of how I see them playing out down the stretch of this season and because of the, again, potential upside I think that they could bring to the table for our lineups and potentially see their strongest games come here in the finale and the home stretch of this season. So, 5 running backs, potential league winners. Hit the intro, and let's get started. Alrighty, here we go. So for those of you that have been watching the channel for a while now, I might begin to sound like a bit of a broken record here, as the first 3 names on the list we've been talking about for a good month plus in terms of being trade targets in the past weeks and being players that I wanted to stash on my roster for the season-ending stretch here. So Antonio Gibson is the first running back I'm feeling really good about. Since he's really gotten that shin together and his health has not been a question, his production and volume has been fantastic, and that for the most part over the last month has translated into viable fantasy production. He did have one game where he didn't really have any receiving involvement. He did rush for 90 plus yards, but he lost a fumble, so he ended the day with 7 fantasy points. But outside of that, Gibson has been very, very impressive. He's also got 14 receptions through his last 4 games, which is his most reception totals of any 4-game stretch prior in this season. So what I like to see about Antonio Gibson right now is that the valuable touches, particularly in the receiving game, are coming at the most crucial time of the season when we need them. 28 touches, 111 yards, and a touchdown against the Raiders this past week. Again, stacking productive games. That's what you love to see here. 19 or more touches in 4 straight contests. And he's got 23 or more rushing attempts. Forget total touches. 23 or more rushing attempts in 3 out of his last 4 games. So I like what I'm seeing. The volume right now. Washington's offense and team as a whole is trending upwards. They've been stacking some wins here and really figuring out how to run this offense with Taylor Heinicke under center. Again, if Antonio Gibson can continue the strong rate of receiving involvement that he's had the last month, it's nothing astronomical. It's not necessarily what we projected for him in the early phases of this fantasy season, in particular the draft season. However, for what it's been the rest of the year, where he was really only putting up 2 to 3 reception increments, it's a nice change of scenery here and something that, again, this trend has been continuing for the better part of a month now. It's very encouraging, and down the stretch, I think he provides some really nice upside. David Montgomery, another one we've been talking a ton about here at SFS. I love what this guy brings to the table for this Bears offense. I truly believe that he's the focal point of this team going forward, with them going back and forth between Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. Now, obviously, they would rather stick with one quarterback and not be flip-flopping, but Justin Fields' health has gotten a bit in the way. When I watched the Cardinals game on Sunday, I saw a lot more opportunity for David Montgomery than what he actually produced, and he had one of his best games of the season outside of the Detroit game where he got injured earlier on in the year. I believe that was back in week 5. There wasn't super efficient runs coming from Montgomery. He was deadly in the receiving game. He's coming off of basically his late season breakout against Arizona. And in a game in which the Bears weren't overly competitive, he still found and managed to be a very reliable back as an outlet receiving option for Andy Dalton when the pass rush got close to him, as well as being an effective rusher. So you're getting a player with dynamic capabilities. He is the clear 3-down back for this offense. They gave him a short break here and there in favor of Khalil Herbert, who came in and gave him a quick rest. But that's nothing I'm concerned about right now. I absolutely love David Montgomery, his schedule down the rest of the season. Green Bay, probably his toughest matchup on Sunday night the rest of the way here, coming up in Week 14. Then after that, Minnesota, Seattle, the Giants, and Minnesota again are four absolutely beautiful matchups to have on a running back's closing season schedule here. If the Bears stay on the basics, run the football, play smash mouth football, we're forgetting, or maybe you're not forgetting, but David Montgomery had a touchdown pulled off the board on Sunday, so we left 6 more points hanging out there. He could have potentially had even more inflated numbers. So you give me a running back as talented as David Montgomery, a guy who runs as hard as he does. Again, super dynamic. He's the focal point of his offense right now with a team that can't really be pass-centric. And then you give me that schedule. I love the upside here. I think he's a very healthy RB2 start if that's the role he plays for you in your lineups. And I see him having multiple top 12 finishes in the remaining 5-game stretch of this season. Elijah Mitchell, another one who's come on strong here as of late. This San Francisco run game has really gotten rolling, and this is a team that focalizes or emphasizes rather their, I think I just made up a word there. I could be wrong. I don't know. They really emphasize the run game, and Kyle Shanahan always manages to have a productive fantasy running back. Now at times in various seasons, particularly the last 2 years, you never really know what you're going to get, especially when Raheem Mostert is out of the lineup. However, Elijah Mitchell has been a nice change of scenery in the fact that he has been the predominant 3-down running back while he is healthy and available for this team to take advantage of. He is physical. He is a force and a load to handle on the goal line. He'll score you touchdowns. He's not always the most efficient runner, but he is effective in the fantasy scoring department because of the volume he gets. And again, when he punches in those goal line touchdowns, he's able to be very effective. 25 touches, 84 yards from scrimmage, and a rushing touchdown against Seattle. I thought he had more to be had in that game. However, with Seattle kind of coming back late in that game and changing the tide for San Fran, they were really forced to pass the ball and didn't do much running in the fourth quarter of that game. But going forward here, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston, none of those matchups are overly intimidating for me in terms of how I expect Elijah Mitchell to perform here. I think he's a weekly top 24 must-start player in all of those games. And again, just like David Montgomery here, there is the potential to finish as a top 12 player multiple times down the stretch of the season. Cordarrelle Patterson, this is one of the higher-end producing players on the list for today. Now, all of these names are very established top 24 running backs right now, or at least in terms of what they are on a week-to-week basis. Some of these guys have had injuries and missed time, and obviously in the season-long standings, they might not be in that category right now. But Cordarrelle Patterson has certainly had the most point output throughout this season. However, I'm getting to a point where I'm no longer intimidated with Patterson's matchup. The one game we saw him put up his season low performance was the game in which he got injured. He had 3.5 fantasy points and half PPR scoring. Outside of that bubble, Cordarrelle Patterson has managed to put up 9.5 or more fantasy points, again, and half PPR scoring every single week dating back to week 2. And in week 1, he had 7 points. So whether it's Tampa Bay this past week with a really tough run matchup, or another team like the Saints, who you'll see throughout the season as well, obviously an in-division rival, Patterson is able to be incorporated into this offense by the Falcons coaching staff, and they emphasize getting him the football. If it's a tough game in the running department, they line him up out wide and throw him passes downfield. We saw him succeed very nicely the first game around with the Saints in that role, stretching the field and just beating their cornerbacks. Patterson's super dynamic, and that's the advantage he brings to the table here. He's either going to get valuable rushing attempts, score touchdowns. He's explosive as well. I mean, we've seen that throughout his career as a kick returner, and he is a load to tackle, as he is a 6-foot-plus human being that runs a very fast straight line speed and can barrel through your defenders. You're also getting a player who can line up out wide again and catch passes. So I love what CPAT has done this year. I've been not necessarily a believer that he would put up top 10 production throughout this entire season, but while others were bailing on him right away, I thought we had something here. I continue to believe that down the stretch, and I think that Cordarrelle can be a very integral part of a lot of championship teams, as obviously one of the most valuable waiver wire pickups of the year. You can also slide Elijah Mitchell into that category. Potentially was a draft pick for some teams, though. And then finally here, Javonte Williams. This kid is a monster. I've heard a lot of talk after Sunday night. Obviously, is he the next Jonathan Taylor for 2022 fantasy football? That's yet to be seen. I don't know if he's necessarily the same level of a talent. And in particular, the thing that I think is most important here, I'll just address this really quick. I don't know if he has the straight line speed or the ability to accelerate as fast as JT does. And I think that that's going to be the one thing that makes it so Javonte will never be the upper echelon player, or I shouldn't say he won't be an upper echelon fantasy back, because he could absolutely be a top 5 fantasy running back next year. But maybe he won't have the gaudy numbers that JT does, because I don't think that when he gets into the open field, he's going to be quite as fast and have the burners, the track speed that Jonathan Taylor does. However, this is as complete of a running back as it gets. His patience that I saw him run with behind his offensive line was fantastic. I mean, there was a few plays when it looked like he was dead to rights, and he had no open hole in the offensive line to run through, and he just sits back there, he shifts around, he always keeps his feet moving and never gets flat-footed, and then he bounces through a hole that opens up at the last second. It's almost Le'Veon Bell-esque, and I'm not going to dive too deep into that comparison. I love Le'Veon Bell. He's one of my favorite all-time players at the peak of his prime. However, I like what I see from Javonte. I'm not sure if he's going to be used or in an offense necessarily as effectively as JT has been this season in particular. I think that's a bit extreme. However, he absolutely has top 12 written all over him for next year. We're talking 2021, though. So for the rest of this season, I mean, you love what we saw out of Javonte Williams. The scrimmage yards, it was fantastic. He scored a touchdown in the receiving game, and he was very involved as an overall super dynamic back. However, again, we have that one elephant in the room. That is Melvin Gordon, and there's going to be a lot of naysayers who don't believe in Javonte Williams' ceiling and potential because Melvin Gordon is not expected to be out, obviously, a lengthy period of time. He could play in Week 14, and that is something that is 1,000% going to factor into Javonte Williams' fantasy capabilities down the stretch of the season. However, the reason he makes the list today is because we saw one game this year with him on full display, and we can now understand what he is capable of doing in matchups when he's given the opportunity to produce in that fashion. It was fantastic. It was everything you could have hoped for and more. Again, the dynamic playmaking ability, the rushing intangibles that we saw, again, going back to that patience, the yards after contact, the physicality he ran with. This guy's a beast, and he's going to be someone that is a force to be reckoned with in the fantasy world for years to come. Again, though, we're talking about the rest of this year. So, essentially, my take here is that Javonte Williams is going to be limited to the amount of touches and the amount of work that this Denver Broncos coaching staff allows him to have on a per-game basis. Denver is still in the hunt for this playoff season. They're at 500 right now. I'm not expecting them to mail it in for this year. They're going to continue competing for a wild card position and trying to get into one of those lower-end spots. What that means to me is if these coaches saw enough from Javonte Williams, they could potentially, in what has mostly been a 50-50 even split, maybe 55-45 if you want to go there. It has been neck and neck between Gordon and Williams in terms of overall touches throughout this entire season. If they saw enough, and I personally did, I love Melvin Gordon. I'm a Wisconsin Badger fan. I currently attend school there. For Melvin Gordon, who is one of my all-time Badger grades, obviously, of my lifetime at the running back position. Now, there's clearly a lot better players on defense, Russell Wilson, all that great stuff. There's no bias here. Melvin Gordon has had a great career, but I think at this point in time, it is fair to say after what we saw on Sunday night, Javonte Williams today is probably the better player. So if the coaching staff determines it's in the best interest of their team, you could potentially see a boost and an increase of the volume Javonte sees down the stretch of this season. This is all perspective. There is no certainty, no guarantee to this. However, the talent is there. The opportunity is there. It's going to come down to coaching and emphasizing whether or not he's going to get this level of involvement down the stretch of this season. I would not, if you have trade seasons still available, I would not move Javonte. I think that there's an opportunity right now to sell high. I would just hold. If you have Javonte Williams on your roster, and again, we talked about in the intro today, I don't know how many of you guys are still able and eligible to make fantasy trades right now, but if that is still an option in your league, again, I would hold tight on Javonte, because if something were to happen to Melvin Gordon, if we do see a spike in the volume that is in the snap percentage that is directed toward Javonte, you could potentially start to get top 12 production, top 15 production even out of Williams down the stretch in what is a great fantasy playoff schedule for this Broncos team. So hang tight on Javonte. I love all 5 players on the list today. I'm super excited in particular. I can't wait to get into Dynasty content for the season because Javonte is going to be such a beast next year if Melvin's not around and in that situation. A lot of fun stuff to talk about. It's going to be a great end of the fantasy season. I'll see you guys in the intro. All right, I think I told you guys I would see you in the intro. However, that is a thing of the past. We are here in the outro now. So thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. If you have any questions about your teams and any way that I can be of service to you here, again, as we close out this fantasy regular season, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you guys and help out as many of you as possible. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out my league-winning wide receiver episode, and I'll see you there. Peace out.